This workflow is going to have a look at the new 2023 twinmotion view add-in for Revit. So here I have a simple Revit demo data set. It's pretty light, it's got some materials on it, and I want to now take this into twinmotion. So there's a few options here: open twinmotion, direct link and synchronize, direct link connections, and then the older option, I believe, to send out a datasmith file and other different export settings here. So just going to start with the basics today. Going to open up in twinmotion, have a test of making some changes in the Revit model with some of the geometry, and then seeing how that will link back into twinmotion. I'll then add some assets, play around with some materials, set up some lighting, and ideally get something that looks presentable. So some of the options we have here, I don't have an existing project, so I'm just going to do this from scratch. These are the options. You can keep the hierarchy, you can collapse by material, you can collapse all. I like to keep the hierarchy. UV precision, I haven't gone into that too much, but I believe that will relate to UVW mapping, and then some other settings here with light and processing. So I'm just going to leave this all default and hit OK. And now we have the Revit file loading into the twinmotion space, and here we have the model there. So just zooming out, and you can see it's come through okay. A few things that I like to do is just delete this plane, so just select that background and delete it, and then go to here to the settings, go to the location, and get rid of the background city. Again, if you want something like countryside, you could do all that, but I prefer to use HDRI environments, which I'll get into in a second. For navigating here, it's the gaming keys, so W for left, S for zoom back, W for zoom in, D for right, and then to navigate up and down is your Q and E keys. And of course you can use your mouse to navigate around as well. So a quick simple example here, if I want to make some changes to the design and just see the link. So here for this roof terrace, which appears to be clad with a carpet floor, we want to add some sort of railing here. So we just want to do the link from Revit back into twinmotion. So here we do have the option to make some adjustments here or reload the file. So you could just do it directly from here. Or here in Revit, I could go and go to that roof level, save the project, and here on that roof level just go and create a wall. Maybe choose the right wall, and I'll very quickly and very roughly just do something here. So here are my changes. I go to twinmotion and direct link and synchronize, and then back here in twinmotion, those updates are done. So we're going to go through the exploration of the model, add some materials and some lighting, and possibly produce a animation or some stills of the model. So as you can see, it's very simple. It's an open space in the center. I haven't designed any sliders here for it yet to close it off, but it's an open outdoor planned living space with a garage at one end and some bedrooms and a bathroom at the other end. And then as you go upstairs here, you have the terrace with the current material, which is carpet. And what I want to do is start going through this model and adding some items from twinmotion to make this look presentable. So first thing I like to do is look at HDRIs. You do have outdoor ones, and you do have studio and skies. These may take a little time to load up. Just going to click on them and they'll start to load. What's good here is to be signed in to Epic Games, and then that way you can download all of that. If you haven't signed in, you'll have to go and do it. So I'm just signing in as myself. And here you can choose an environment, which would be, now it's loaded. It is loaded, and you can see the environment we have here, and down when we get down to this level. Okay, some interesting things here happening with the power line. So it all comes down to where this particular image was shot. So there's a few things here. You can go and adjust the rotation. So maybe we just don't want to see any of those power lines in the background. Maybe something like this might be appropriate. There's a couple of things you can do with the actual dome. You can also choose whether you want that to affect the lighting or not. So it's interesting what you can actually do with these tools. Other things you can do is you can customize intensity to that. You can customize how you want that HDRI to work within the scene. So back here with the skylighting, so we have the skylighting environment. We'll go more. Go back here, skylighting to the environment. You'll click on that one. There's dynamic sky. This is the HDRI, but I usually find the backdrop HDRI gives you a bit more control. So once we do this, we'll see a dome, and it may default to a certain size, but you'll just see there's a little bit more control of what we've got here. So first things that we need to do is go to more. We get a lot more features. We want to drop the height, so get it down below my ground level. So about there looks okay. As we start to rotate this, you can see those power lines aren't there anymore, which is kind of handy. So it's kind of scaled everything back a little bit to build it within a dome. So this gives you a lot more control, and we can also do other things like adjust the intensity. This stuff probably will leave for later, but it can just be really helpful. Other things I haven't got too much into is like the offset. This, if I'm looking at other type of tools, you can adjust the UVWs of a spherical image in other applications. So you don't need to do too much here, and then you can rotate it around, but we'll just leave that for now. Other thing you might want to do is just adjust the size. So you can see here you can actually control the scale of this dome, which is a lot easier to work with. So that's kind of nice if you're wanting to just get a little bit more control over the detail or the resolution of that information there in the background. So that's my preference, just to do the lighting, and that can make a lot of difference to the photorealism you might want to achieve a bit later on. So that's the lighting. Back here in the settings, there's a whole lot of things we can get into, which is to do with the rendering engine, and you can turn this on, and then you're going to see in real time the light calculating. So I won't bother too much about that right now. We'll just keep it on default, just with the GI illumination. You can sort of see that's like light bouncing around. You could turn that off if you want to, and then shadow. I'll just leave that as is. And now I want to look at putting some context into this to make it look a bit more believable. So vehicles, we're at the driveway here. In fact, we'll do materials first, and then we'll populate it with context. So at the moment, if we look at the driveway, the entry, we might want to look at ground coverings, nature, man-made. So nature is all your grass. So this is kind of a holiday house or a batch. So we'll choose like some sort of grass that maybe isn't that well kept. And you do want to adjust the scale here. And you can see you want to take it up to 10. You can actually crank it up even further if you want. You can type that in, and that will give you a bit more detail on the grass. But again, it's once we get into maybe the 3D mode of adding grass, you'll get better results here. Back to ground and to man-made, we can look at different types of asphalts for the driveway, and different types of finishes for the concrete. So I'll choose something which is a little bit more modern perhaps. Those are the cobblestone tiles. Again, the scale, doesn't really like the scale too much, but I'll do that for now. And then here for the driveway, maybe that type of asphalt. So other things you might want to consider here, the detail or the junction between the driveway and the pavers. You can grab these objects and they are movable, so you can possibly go -0.1 or something like that. Oops. So you may want to just drop that down just a little bit, which can just give you a little bit of detail, bit of extra added detail should you want to have that. So you don't have to go back to Revit to do that, but again, there's always a knock-on effect. So we have issues with the hidden garage door there. So some other things we might need or want to do is adjust the scale and the location of the texture map. So I've just gone here into the concrete, and you can choose a particular concrete that you want. It is it's got a bit too much glow here in the preview, but you can drag that onto the material. That's how it will come in default, and then you can scale it up. Again, I'll choose say 20 to make that a bit bigger, but I want the adjustments of the X and Y and Z values to change here. So you go to more, and you can rotate it should you want to. So simple one is like 90 degrees, but I'm going to keep it on the standard location. And then here we can move or stretch it. So I don't need to really move it in the Z direction. I just want to move it up a little bit. And I want this look and feel to have the concrete sort of dripping at the top. So I'll try my best to sort of get that looking kind of accurate. And so -33.3.35. No, the other way. Okay, so you can play around with all of this. Again, you can probably stretch it as well. But that's one way to get that looking a little bit more believable. But again, it comes down to the finish you want and how nice you want it to look and feel. For some people, that might look a bit brutal. So that's one example of getting a bit more fidelity with the materials. And then other things here, you always want to choose a good glass, and this may come down to what your preference is for the actual output here. So I want to focus on the outside of the building. I don't need to be looking into the building, so I might go for something like a reflective glass. And you can see here it's giving us some nice results, and it's reflecting that HDRI. So that's kind of a nice reason to have those HDRIs in the design. And I think on this side of the building with that glass. Now maybe I don't want to see as much on the inside there, so if I just go down a little bit, it's not too bad. But you could go and look at the opacity settings here. So if we drop that down to say 50 or 1, that's going to let in more, and then 85 is less, or even 90. Just because I want this to be more about the outside of the building and not have any distractions of the inside. Some other things we could do here, we could look under the object setting at particles and add fire. So you got one here, a larger fire, which you can place inside of this fireplace. It is smoking quite a bit, or we can go for a smaller fire. Again, it is snapping correctly to the fireplace. Kind of a tricky one to work with here, because it's a pretty controlled space, but we can move this up as needed. And you can see here, if I play around with what that is going to be fixed to, it's actually hitting on that face there. So quick example of adding some fire here. Looks like it's just going a little bit odd with the chimney there, but again, it's a nice simple tool to use to add instant particle effects without having to go on and bake them in. Okay, so here is my updated model with some changes in the materials. So I've added some weatherboards, some finishes to the doors. You can see the windows with the reflections now, a polished concrete slab, and some materials added to the kitchen island here. So pretty simple. And to show you some of the things that I've just used here, you've got a little magic wand tool. What's interesting about black is it can be very hard to see in the shadows. So again, if I want to see that a bit better on this side of the building, I have my backdrop environment here. And the reason why I use the HDRI environment is I can just do this and see the beautiful black material here. And I'm just going to go and grab that eyedropper to bring out that material. And I've just adjusted the scale, and I've just gone to the color and made it black. Some other cool things you can do with this tool is you can bring in materials and assets from online. So here, just make sure you're signed in to your Epic Games account. Here's materials and all the objects. I can type in a keyword here, iron, and this will go and bring objects or assets and materials that I could use in my design here. So there is a wealth of information available. I just need to click on that to download it. Once it's downloaded, I can just drag and drop it onto that asset. And of course I could change the color as needed. So that's a really handy tool to actually grab all this information and then bring it across, even if you want Iron Man and stuff like that. Going to look at an option here for adding some grass to this lawn. So here in the control panel, we're going to go to vegetation scatter, and I'm going to choose some grass types to paint with. So typical one might be a lawn, but I could bring in some others here. I'll just do it first with the lawn. You can also go and delete this after it's been painted. So select it. Here is the scatter, and I can go and scatter that. Click on it a few times to add a bit more dense on the lawn, and we can go down and see that grass there. The other one I could do is I could bring in, say, some other grass type, so some wild grass, and then with those ones all selected, again I can go and scatter. I'll just move up a little bit, and you can see I'm getting nice dense grass. So pretty quick way to add a lot of dense grass. So this is kind of a holiday house, a batch where we maybe haven't done the lawns, and you can see here I've actually broken that grass down into 2 bits. So if we wanted to look at some other options here, I'll just do the clover fields, 2, 3, and again same thing. So here we have some dense clovers. And there's a lot of detail here. There are some settings should you want to turn off the wind effect, and I forget where that is at the moment. I know you can do it with the individual ones. Here we go, settings. So you can start to adjust these here once they're all there. So we can start to make them a bit bigger. We can maybe change, we want to have stripes, turn the wind on, turn it off. So leave that on and then make them look more dry or more plush. So all of these things can be done. Again, we've just gone to the vegetation scatter, and the two options is the wild grass or the clovers. You can see some have gone into the gravel there, which I can do a bit later. But it's a pretty quick and easy way to do more realistic lawns, and you can see there's kind of a culling at the back here. So when I get close to that, it will draw that information as needed. So that's kind of nice. So it doesn't consume too much processing power on my PC. Finally, for this part of the basic demo, I want to be able to create an image based on the one I've got shown here. So this is just not in the media player at the moment. I'm just looking at a view that I want to choose. I'm not adding vehicles and people and stuff at the moment, just because sometimes that can be a bit distracting depending on the quality of it. So I'm just going to go to the location that I want for this shot, and maybe for this one I might want something more from this end of the building. So I'm just going to zoom back a little bit till I get the rough shot that I want, and I always like to do the low shots a little higher, and I'm going to create an image. So image is saved, and if I move this around, I can just hit this little refresh button and that will update the viewpoint of the image. So I'll use that as my view that I want, and maybe the low shot. And then from here I can go and make some changes to the quality of that image. There's your lighting, your renderer, your location, your weather. So with the lighting, for example, at the moment I'm using the dome environment, so I can go to that backdrop and look at the rotation. So for here, as I go and rotate that dome, I can see the reflection on the glass. I can get an idea of the light illuminating that black material, which is sometimes a little bit tough to light. So I'll go for something like that. Maybe there'll be a little bit of a glint on the glass there. And I'll leave that as is for now, and then just go back to lighting. We can also adjust the white balance. So 6,500 is usually a good starting point. 7,300 kelvins is probably a little bit warm, or you can drop it down to 500 for a cooler effect. But 6,500 is usually good. I have left off the sun intensity. I want this all to be lit by the environment, but if I crank that up here, you can start to see the sun starting to illuminate that space. But I don't want to go too crazy on that. I just want to keep this very, very subtle. So maybe I just want a little bit of a shadow, but you can see without any sun, I can still get some illumination on that face. And it sometimes can look a little bit more real. And then you can go into a few more settings here. I think if I adjust that, will we get a little bit of a larger sun? No. Okay. So here, pretty simple settings, and then back in the image, there's a couple other things you can do. There's the renderer, so we can turn on the path tracer, which is the ray tracing engine, or global illumination, and you can start to see the impact of that starting to bounce some light around. I'm just going to leave that off for now, and I want to look more at things like the camera. Here we can turn on the parallel. Again, I'm not a big fan of that unless it's absolutely needed. We can also adjust our focal length, so we can bring it back a little bit more, but 18 is usually pretty good to start with, and you could potentially look at things like 28, which is meant to be the peripheral of a human eye, but I'll just leave it on 18. Adding the depth of field can also add something to the shot. So at the moment, the depth of field is set close to the grass, and of course we want to focus on the building. So as I go and crank that a little bit, maybe 35 meters might be right. We can also maybe adjust the view here, and we can get into adjusting the aperture. So this little symbol is like a graphic for the opening in a camera, allowing in less or more light. So if you've got that set to 1, it will let in more or less light. Looks like this one's not really doing anything for me at the moment, but if you change that, it should let in more or less light, but it's not doing it for me right now. And then this is to do with the detail and the depth and the blur that you get here. So just some simple things where you can work with the camera to achieve some more realistic results here. Near clipping, I haven't got too much into this just yet. But you can see it's starting to clip a little bit as I get further away, so I cranked it up. There's some visual effects here. Again, you could do these in post, or you could do these here. Here's some pre-baked ones in, so if you want to go for that, could give you some nice effects depending on the desired look. I'll just leave it on none for now. And then saturation, sometimes it's quite good to actually desaturate just a little bit. So if we put that on, say, 35, it just looks a little bit better with less saturation. Contrast, of course, is going to really bring this up quite a bit. I usually find whenever doing visuals, if you put things on 65 or 35, it tends to work quite well. So I'll leave that as is, and then just go back to visual effects. Other filters you have here. Again, this is if you want to get it more graphical. Clay render, you can turn that on if you want to, or leave that off. And then reflections, again, turning that on or off doesn't really impact this type of image too much. And then finally here, I don't want to do too much with the scene states. I want to go back to that main image and turn on the lighting. There's a number of other things you can play around with here should you want to, but these are just some basic settings that I'm using for today, and you can start to adjust those depending on the graphic that you want, but I prefer to keep it a little bit more subtle. So here back in the renderer, we can turn the path tracer on. Again, that's going to change things a little bit. You can, of course, crank these up. You can see here we're getting the fireflies. So this is just doing the bounce calculations. The longer you leave it for, the better it's going to be. It's got a denoiser here, so that just helps blend pixels together, and then aliasing filtering. Here is the edges. So it starts to clean up the edges a little bit. Now, if you've used other tools, there's more stuff to do with this, with primary and secondary calculations with other rendering engines. So here it's cleaned up. The noise has done its thing. You can see it's kind of blended it a little bit. If I turn that off, it will start to sharpen up a little bit, but it'll take a little bit longer to render out. So that's the main settings that I want for my image. And then there's some formats here at the end in terms of what you want, like for the height, width. I'm just leaving it on full HD, but you can crank it up maybe even more to 4K. And from here we have that image. Make sure I refresh that, and we can run that out as a final render. One little last thing here, you could look at the emissive. Just turning that off makes things a little bit more realistic. This is just my opinion, but we could, again, this is like fine-tuning a car. You can go back to the camera or the lighting, and you could adjust things a little bit here, and you just might get a little bit more photorealism. So just another little thing I just noticed here with the final settings, and sometimes you can adjust the exposure. 2.2 may overexpose a little bit, maybe just 1. But you'll start to tweak these things and get different results. So again, it all comes down to what you want to be achieving at the end of the day, how dark you want your darks, how light you want your lights. All of this can be customized here. So from here, I want to export this out. I'm just going to do it as an image. You can do videos and panoramas and stuff, but today is just to get some stills. I will grab that image there and just double click it, and then start the export, and that should render it out pretty quickly. Okay, and here is the final image. It actually rendered pretty quick, and it is at 4K, and you can see the detail here. So this is just raw from twinmotion, and I could take this out further and do more in Photoshop, but it's come out pretty good. You can see it's got the depth of field, the lighting's looking pretty good, the material's looking good. So that's the 30-minute workflow on how to take the Revit model into twinmotion and then produce a render like this with some of the basic tools.